Welcome to Tourism Talk. I'm Laura Oswald, Director of Marketing at the Paducah Convention and Visitors Bureau. Today, I'm welcoming my colleague, Fowler Black, to share with us about the Paducah Signature Experiences. These experiential tours are designed exclusively for groups, and they preserve and celebrate some of Paducah's most important stories. Welcome back, Fowler.
Thanks. Good to be here with you especially.
Yeah, thank you. And it is Kentucky Tourism's Year of Kentucky Storytellers, so we thought that this would be an appropriate focus to go on the road, actually, to some of these experiences. But before we do, I think you can help us set the stage. So to get started, tell us a little bit about your Paducah story.
Yeah, sure. I'm a native Paducan and boomeranged back to Paducah in my mid-20s, and I grew up in a household where Paducah was topic number one, and in particular related to Paducah's history and built heritage, and the importance that it played in telling Paducah's story. And while I went on to study music in college and voice, my first love sort of kept calling me back, and I didn't realize that a place could be a job. And so I came back here and ran into Mary Hammond on the street, and within a couple of weeks, I found myself in a new trajectory in life, selling a place that I love. And so much of the sell is telling a story. And storytelling, to me, is a powerful thing no matter what story it is. It's storytelling, and the storyteller plays a vital role in gaining the interest of other people. And so a destination in particular, I think, is a unique platform for telling a story.
Absolutely, and you are a storyteller, one of the chief storytellers for our community in your role as sales director, working with groups, inviting groups in. How do you think of yourself as a curator or as a storyteller within that role specifically?
Sure, with the group market, many times you're bringing people into Paducah in mass, whether it be a steamboat, a motor coach, a meeting, a family reunion, a wedding. And so you have people's attention in some ways as a presenter, whereas an individual, it's sort of a one-on-one conversation like you and I are having right now. And so you have certain advantages and disadvantages as servicing the group market. But one of the great advantages, I think, is that you can do things in Paducah that you cannot do as an individual, that you can do as a group, simply because you can create a notified appointment. And people together seem to carry a little more leverage also with your partners, just simply because you can tell the story once, and it can go in many, many different directions depending on how many people you got.
Absolutely,
So.
And I think that you do that so well, and in being a huge part of this experiential development process, you really helped our partners see how they can customize to the specific group size or needs, and often this is a visiting group, but it certainly can be something that's relevant to local groups as well.
That's right, and so the development with our partners that I mentioned, your partners are an attraction, a hotel, a restaurant, and in particular, we started with step one with our nonprofit attractions, and that would include places like the National Quilt Museum, Hotel Metropolitan, River Discovery Center, Civil War Museum, and so when we started to build these, we wanted to be sure that they were sellable in a way, but also that we were not sort of overreaching our capabilities. And so with Hotel Metropolitan, for instance, that's a pretty intimate space, and you want people to be in an environment where they can most conveniently take in the story. Mm-hmm. And so we determined really it's best experienced with no more than 15, 16 people there.
Right.
Versus the National Quilt Museum, where you could get a full motor coach in at once and have a VIP tour through the gallery. But then it gets a little tricky once you get into the deep dive experience, hands-on portion at the National Quilt Museum, where people are on sewing machines. There are only so many resources
right.
that are there. There are about 20 sewing machines. So you have to be clever, creative, mm-hmm. and adaptable. But to me, I think that it has the experiences, the Paducah Signature experiences, have been able to find a life of their own, and it has worked out, especially with the attractions collaborations.
Yes.
So they could flip, flop, and do one during one point, and do the Hotel Metropolitan at another point, or do them simultaneously and flip flop. To me, I think any group, as you mentioned, can take advantage of that. It doesn't have to be a visiting group. Tourism can take place right in your
right.
hometown. And we have enjoyed seeing that simply because it helps to also educate your community about the stories it has to tell. And your community, I think, is your greatest ambassador.
Absolutely. And I think that, thinking about our community as a whole, getting to know these experiences and these stories, that really is a parallel to the development of these experiences. That process of getting mm-hmm. to know and become very intimate with those stories and what each attraction represents and can preserve and really engage visitors or guests into.
Indeed. I think we are all destination marketers. You and I happen to do it as a living on paper, and in our lives. But I think everybody can be a destination marketer, especially if they're proud of their city. And I think that is what was grown in me as I grew up here, is that I was proud of where I was from, and I think stories play a big part of that. Of course, there are other factors like family and I do think that the stories and the accomplishments that you've had as a community, especially if it's been a tough road to get there, really can make you prideful. And that's what I think the important part of sharing these experiences with locals. Mm-hmm. That's where this comes into play, is that you can begin to say, wow, we've got hundreds of stories that are vitally important to the fabric of our nation. And our culture is fleshed out in these experiences.
Absolutely.
And with the River Discovery Center, for instance, they talk about the mound builders. Mm-hmm. And we take for granted what those people, indigenous people here, had to do for a meal. And so it helps you to realize what the river meant to people then and what the river means to people now, and how it mm-hmm. integrates into our way of living
Absolutely.
In Paducah today.
So how did that process go of working with partners to identify these key stories?
I think the stories already existed, right? So it's taking what our partners are already telling, but finding those important elements. For instance, Hotel Metropolitan, the element of surprise. You don't know as a visitor necessarily who has stayed at Hotel Metropolitan in its past, and you can bring an element of surprise in by, as Miss Maggie is giving the tour of her hotel, adding an element of Ella Fitzgerald coming down the steps, to get some coffee, and here are a group of people in this hotel who otherwise wouldn't be there under the cultural law. So to me, the element of surprise is about engagement, and so it's finding those stories and things that stick with people. And to me, those are things that have more to do with the way they make you feel.
Absolutely.
Than exactly what they're saying. It's sort of like Bossy the Cow on the floodwall mural. If I were to poll all the people that have taken a floodwall murals tour, I would say that there's probably a 50% chance or greater that the story they remember is about Bossy the Cow being up on the second story porch of the lower town property at 6th Street. And it's just the way it makes them feel. I think it's a very different kind of story. So you want to tap into those kinds of things that have a unique flair to them, and wordsmith and engineer those stories in ways that are unforgettable. And I think the element of surprise is one. I think the element of feeling, which can come from a number of things, one of which is hands-on, making something you didn't think you'd ever make, like a quilt block, or tapping into something like piloting a barge on a river through a simulator, or talking about what it's like to live on the river for 30 days with a river boat captain. So I think it's finding the stories, especially the ones that have the ability to differentiate, and then tapping into the feelings that are associated with them. And to me, that's what sticks with people, especially with regard to a place.
Absolutely. And you mentioned some of those special characters that sort of come in along the way. And we will be going on the road, taking Tourism Talk on the road to go behind the scenes of some of these experiences.
I think that's awesome.
So I hope that everyone will follow along for that. But I would like to say you really helped to set the stage for groups, oftentimes with the floodwall murals. Tell us a little bit about how that acts as a signature experience.
All Paducans know the floodwall murals, but I'm not sure if all Paducans know just how important that public art project has been for our city since the mid-90s. That's when Robert Dafford and Herb Rowe came in with the help of Roe Morse and numerous other people who were involved, Paducah Parks, the City of Paducah, city leaders, city storytellers, and that collaboration project has now become Paducah's diary, a diary that's accessible by all with no admission ticket, and it taps into and begs more questions. And so it's the perfect place to start a tour with a visitor. Not only is it right at the river's edge, but it taps into one of the most colorful stories of Paducah with the 1937 flood. So its utilitarian purpose, number one, is at the root and in the bedrock of our narrative as a city. And then you get to springboard from that into these various vignettes. And so to me, there's no better way to start talking about your city than going to these different chapters of portraits. And the Floodwall Murals project is symbolic in lots of ways. And one of them, it was a shot in the arm for the rebirth and revitalization of downtown. There were many other factors like Market House Theater and the National Quilt Museum and the restoration of the first block of Broadway. But the wall is ubiquitous with, and everybody has a sense of ownership in it. And that, I think, is what is extra powerful about the murals, is that it's reflective of a people, but it's also the people's.
Absolutely.
And it's a project that is a public-private venture, and so springboarding off of that is the perfect place to start. So, it could be the mural about Stuart Nelson in venturing into the story of the Hotel Metropolitan.
Right.
Or it could be something like Bossy and the Cow, springboarding into the River Discovery Center's narrative of the '37 flood,
Right.
and what floods have meant to cities, and how the river's been your best friend and worst enemy.
And so it really does. I mean, like you said, it's sort of the people's. Like
Right.
there are so many stories and aspects of Paducah's history there, but it does relate to these modern day attractions and experiences. So you mentioned River Discovery, Hotel Metropolitan. It also is a great springboard into the National Quilt Museum and how creativity, quilting, the arts are such a part of who we are today.
Right. And even though there's no mural that's dedicated to the National Quilt Museum or even to quilting within the wall-to-wall flood wall murals, I know that we've started another project over by the Convention Center with quilting and murals, but it's the art itself that is reflective of an industry full of creativity, craftsmanship, and of course an artistic kind of reflection. So I think that it in itself, with the utilitarian purpose, then acting as canvas, is also another notable way of saying, hey, this is using what we've got, resources that already exist, our bones, and making the best of them. That is what I think is most powerful about a destination, is how resourceful can they be? And in that, it reflects the creativity of a place. So you might not have the greatest bones as a place, but it's what you make of it. And I think the flood wall murals is a shining example of how to create something that sticks with people, but also is sustainable, and it's only sustainable really if we stay vigilant about it too. That wonderful exhibit light called the sun, when it gets up into the western sky and beats down on that wall for 10 years, you can see just how much of a toll it takes on the murals. So we've got to always be cognizant of taking care of what we have.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's why we're certainly at a stopping point with the Murals project in terms of additional murals, because you've got to really stay vigilant about having the resources to take care of what you've got.
Right. And speaking about that resourcefulness and the illustration that the murals give, I think that this whole experiential development process is also very much using what we had. And in your role, I know, thinking about all those group tour operators, what's new in Paducah? And this really, it's not, not new stories. These are old stories. This is Paducah's history, Paducah's character, but packaging it in a new way. So,
Right.
talk a little bit about, that process of working with our partners, the experiential development process. What might our viewers be interested to know about that?
In the development of the experience itself, we're the storytellers, but they are storytellers too, they being our partners and our attractions. They're the key storytellers. And so they put in a lot of the grunt work and the trench work to wordsmith and an engineer with the help of a consultant that was brought in who has done this in many other places. But still, it's all up to them as an attraction. And so I think that we're just sort of a concierge in a way, and so the real credit goes to them being able to pull off servicing a group within the framework that they know is doable, and that is, again, going back to the example of Hotel Metropolitan, she'll need an hour, and she'll need probably no more than 15 people. So let's take, for example, a school group. Again, trying to instill pride in your people growing up in the city, you might not ever know that that's there. And I think if we can, for example, convince the schools to bring in small clumps of 15 to 20 children at a time, that I think is an investment for the future of Paducah, because it tells you that we have significance of some kind, especially as it relates to a human interest story. So, so I think that building this experience has to keep in mind multiple audiences, and I think again it's trying to tap into those elements that are tacky, that are sticky, that stay with you, and that is, I think, ultimately going back to finding the feeling.
Absolutely. Well, I think that our viewers should certainly stay tuned as we do go behind the scenes, but they can visit paducah.travel/groups to really get a feel for how we are categorizing and putting some parameters on these. Seeing maybe a group of friends, or a garden club, a church group, a school group. There are many applications, a family reunion, you're bringing in people from out of town. Think about how these might be a way to elevate that experience.
Absolutely. It's what I would call a deep dive. You're not just going in and doing show and tell. You're going in and you are experiencing the characteristics of the destination. And if I go somewhere, out of town for a trip, it's typically those kinds of things that I will remember. And again, we've got an array of them, but we hope to extend that even further as well. I know that you have certainly worked with the Kentucky Year of Food last year. Even though storytelling is this year's, food is last year's, and I think a culinary experience is a next step for us, as well as maybe offering a deeper dive to the individual traveler. Somebody who comes here, gets off the interstate, and was intrigued with Paducah somehow, and then is able to take a step to dig a little deeper and find the stories underneath. And that might come in the form of something like a walking tour that you can do from your cell phone. With our smartphone capabilities, that it's opportunities are and the choices are endless. So I think it's just about, again, how to package that for them, and doing it in the easiest, most accessible way that we can.
I think obviously there's more to come with this, but we certainly encourage our viewers to check out paducah.travel/groups for these experiences, but so many other great local experiences that we are helping to curate for that visitor audience, but certainly staycations, those local experiences can be really valuable.
And within that, the toolkit that resides at paducah.travel/groups, I think is also helpful, especially if you are planning a reunion or a wedding. There are other resources there that can also help. So thanks for having me on today.
Thank you for coming, and we will actually leave our viewers today with a special video where Fowler sort of takes you behind the scenes for an initial first look at these signature experiences. Please do join us next time as we continue our On the Road Paducah Signature Experiences series.
I believe this is yours.
It's quiet here now, but that's about to change. The history of America and Paducah begins with its rivers. It's the lifeblood of our town, and a heck of a good view. Ah, Paducah, you wild, beautiful, romantic thing, you. Let's take a deep dive adventure into the history of Paducah. The Kincaid Mounds were part of a great Native American city. 1,000 years ago, everything was a hands-on project, completed with great patience and care. this was your mama's 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 cornbread. Oh, and here's another form of handmade survival. The river brings life and commerce to its shores, but navigating 15 empty barges under a bridge in a 30-mile-an-hour wind, that can bring treachery to a riverboat captain. It takes skill and timing to be a deckhand. Nice throw. Exporting commerce transformed life on the river, and these rivers have their own music too. Prepare to be amazed at the significant influence Paducah had on the outcome of the Civil War. Touring the old Tillman House, you'll be guided by Civil War expert Bill Baxter on the weaponry of the Civil War, the life and legacy of General Lloyd Tillman, and the Battle of Paducah. And we're moving on. This is the story of Hotel Metropolitan and Miss Maggie, a strong-willed woman who overcame adversity to build this hotel. It hosted many famous African Americans during segregation. Walk through the room Ella Fitzgerald slept in. Listen closely, and you can hear Billie Holiday's perfect pitch leaking through the wallpaper. Inspire yourself with the ivory keys touched by Mahalia Jackson. All while experiencing the unmatched hospitality of Miss Maggie. Each moment of our history takes on greater meaning through the art that touches every square foot of our UNESCO creative city. This wall connects the city's past with our proclivity for the creative. The Murals experience is big, huge, monumental, outstanding. What could be more hands-on than just pretend I'm not here? What could be more hands-on than creating your own quilt piece? This is not show and tell. This is immersion. And what better way to find inspiration than to be amongst the greatest quilts in the world? All these experiences weave a personal connection to the unique fabric of Paducah's culture. Come be a part of our story. I must go.
One, two, go.